And the last thing I was going to look at is how do those sources of physical laws, how do they help me with ethical choices? So this is where I think science doesn't help me that much. And I think it's a mistake, and actually a dangerous mistake, to think that science can ground our ethics. Science can help us making ethical decisions, but it can't ground them in any way. And so I'll give you one trivial example. What if I wanted to measure the value of a human life? That's a tremendously important question, very important question, for all kinds of practical ways that we govern ourselves and that we live. Well, I'll be a bit facetious. How would I measure the value of a human life? Well, if I was a chemist, I could measure the value of the elements, but surely somebody with gold fillings isn't worth more than somebody without them. If I was a physiologist, I could measure the size of your brain, a psychologist how smart you are, an anthropologist how the community values you, an economist how much economic value you produce, homo economicus. I sometimes feel like I'm measured that way by my superiors. But we all recognize that those are the wrong axes on which to measure the value of the human being. This really important question of do humans have value and how should we value them has to come from somewhere else. And very briefly, the way I like to think about it is this. It's a bit like you're walking on a dark street and there's a very bright light that shines down. And that bright light is the light of science. The great power of science is the ability to really, in this incredible tractor beam-like way, focus on certain types of problems. But there are only certain types of problems that are amenable to the scientific method. Science's great success comes precisely from self-imposed limits. And the idea that you could only find truth where the light is a little bit like a drunk looking for his keys who only looks into the light because that's the only place where he can find them. The fact is that the really important questions of life, the questions of meaning, the questions of purpose, the questions of human value, come from the shadows, if you wish. That's where we should look. There aren't kind of scientific methods that we can use to independently adjudicate for everybody where they are. But we have no choice but to go there and to look as carefully and as carefully as we can. And so my last few minutes, that's a very quick summary of a lot of ideas, I realize. So if I have questions and answers afterwards. So how would I go about then looking at adjudicating about where to ground these questions of purpose and value? I already told you that I'm a Christian. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I believe the classic creeds of the church. I think they're actually really true. And so I think that the point in all these kinds of arguments is that that the best way of going about them is the following. So the best way of looking at the evidence. The problem often with debate is not the evidence, but how to weigh the evidence. And the best way to weigh the evidence is to start from one of two possible starting points. One is that in the beginning, there's a God who created the world, and then look at the world and think, does it resonate better with that assumption, or the alternative assumption, in the beginning, nothing. Either it came out of ontological nothingness, or there's some kind of something that preceded it. And I think that starting from the assumption that there is a God makes a lot more sense of where the world is, if you ask me. I think it explains in a natural way the basis for modern science, for why we see so much beauty and fecundity in the natural world. I think it helps ground really important questions, moral questions. It grounds a kind of moral realism in a way I think is very important. I think it grounds questions of human dignity and value in ways that are absolutely critical. And I think that if I start from the assumption there is no God and then look at the world, then for me, the tapestry that it puts together, the whole, not just each part separately, is for me a lot less satisfying. I think this idea that there's a God behind the world makes the unreasonable effects of mathematics something that much more natural than if the world just popped into being out of nothing. Why would that be true? Why would we understand it? Why would the world even be mathematical? Obviously, all of these arguments are really just very generic arguments for theism. And you might think, well, that's fine, but which God should I choose? And I think that is a different question for a different time, but an incredibly important one. Because I think what you can't do is kind of sit on the fence and say, well, I don't really know, and so I'm not going to care. You have to make a choice either one way or the other, because these questions are so important. They really matter to how we live our lives. They matter to questions of purpose and meaning. And so, just very briefly in the last minute, why do I believe particularly in Christianity? Well, there are many arguments for it. One is that, if there is a God, it would not be at all be surprising that this God would want to communicate with us. And so finding some kind of revelation is something that one might look for. And in the case of Christianity, there's the Bible, which I think is a really remarkable book. And for me, it has had an incredible impact on my life. And I think it points towards the kinds of truths that are deep and powerful. There's a resurrection of Jesus Christ, the life and teaching of Jesus Christ, which I think have exactly that kind of unexpected character. And once you find it, it seems something very deep and powerful. Just like when you first do look at Dirac's theorem, you think that has this completely unexpected, Dirac's derivation, unexpected, but deeply beautiful, non-intuitive, but powerful truth to it. In this way, also, I see this in the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. And of course, things like religious experience are really important. And all these things weave together into a tapestry for why I believe in Christianity, in particular why I'm a follower of Jesus. I've skated over a lot of things. I just want to conclude to say science and religion really, I think, are cousinly disciplines. They're open-minded searches for motivated belief. And for me, Christianity is both intellectually robust and existentially satisfying.